what was your first experience of being in a cooperative?
Being in a cooperative? Well, I joined a cooperative when I was 18. I started as an employee at Derby and Burton Co-operative Society, and it was just on an induction. It was, you can be a member. It wasn't really explained what a member was. This would be a good idea. You get dividend or whatever. So we just filled the forms in. It was kind of along with your contract of employment and all the rest of it. So I joined then without really comprehending what it was that I was joining or why. And then in 2000 I started working for what was known as Leicester and County Co-operative Development Agency, and that was run as a workers' cooperative. So after 6 months I was invited to join as a member, and the criteria for being a member was that you were an employee, so I met that criteria. The criteria for being a member of what was then Derby and Burton Co-op was that you were a consumer. So those are the two different types of co-ops that I've been a member of, a consumer society and an employee-owned cooperative.
So alongside being in a cooperative, do you have memories of cooperatives being a part of your upbringing and family experiences of them?
Well, I remember the word. My granny was a member of the Guild of Co-operators, and that was a social thing she went to. It was for women and men. And then my mum and dad had a co-op number because we lived in a village that didn't have a shop as such, and the co-op delivered fresh bread and fresh milk, and they had a co-op divvy number automatically. But I can remember them saving co-op stamps, but to be truthful, I can also remember Green Shield stamps as well, drawers full of them. So, yeah.
So these early experiences of cooperatives, as well as sort of being your family and your own work experiences, did this kindle your interest in cooperatives from the start, or was it something that developed over time?
It really was something that I fell into because I got a job in the co-op. And to be honest, I was leaving school at 18 with A-levels, and I was applying for management traineeships, you know, as and when they were being advertised. And, you know, it wasn't a burning desire, but when I got the interview and then got the job, it sort of occurred to me that there was a good career structure there, so that appealed. The fact that it was the co-op, a co-op, I didn't really understand what that meant. It was only that understanding came later.
How did you come to be a part of the Central England Cooperative?
So, as I say, I became a member and stayed a member. I worked for the Derby and Burton Co-op for 7 years, and then moved on to work for the Co-operative Development Agency, which was that was the mid-80s. Unemployment was very high, and a lot of local authorities were setting up economic development units, and cooperative development agencies was part of the strategy to help people into self-employment using the cooperative business model, by which time I was quite familiar with that. But so you can remain a member of the consumer co-op by virtue of the fact that you're a consumer. So I obviously made lifelong friendships there and kept involved with something called the member relations activities that went on, and that's whereby a proportion of the profits, or surpluses they're called in co-ops, are set aside for member activities. Historically they would be educational activities, and a lot of them still are, but also leisure activities. And this is kind of a throwback to the times when the co-ops were established in 1844, I think the first one was. So there was no government provision for education. So the co-op had reading rooms, so before public libraries they had education provision for members, leisure provision. So they really did meet the need of their members beyond just being the shop, providing goods and then other services like funeral and travel and so on and so forth.
This expansiveness of what cooperatives do, encompassing all parts of people's lives and all parts of a community and a society as well, seems to be quite a striking feature that we perhaps wouldn't find in other models of organisation or society. Is that something that really appealed to you early?
I think it was, and I think the motivation for setting up co-ops, I think you do find sort of the private sector or the public sector or the charitable sector meeting people's needs. But the idea behind co-ops is that people come together for a common purpose, to meet needs, and that they can meet better by joining together than they could if they were on their own. And I think this resonates perfectly, certainly with my way of thinking, and it's doing things with people rather than doing things to people, which is quite empowering really. And then it is about trade, so it is about people making money and making surpluses, but it's what you do with those surpluses that make the difference in a co-op. So people could choose to shop at a co-op that then applies their profits that are made in a way that they, if they are members, can have a say over. And it's also sort of in my working life, working at CASE, which is what Leicester County CDA is now known as, it offers control as well in a way that you just don't have if you are an employee. And again, that's very empowering.
It's interesting hearing you talk about how cooperatives resonate with your personal beliefs, and also talking about the expansiveness of their influence and importance to communities and society as well. So I'm curious, over the time you've been a part of cooperatives, have they influenced your own political views and personal beliefs?
Well, yes, I think so. I think sometimes you look at anything, large government, small government, you think, oh, this could be done so much better if it was more person-centred, people-focused. If you didn't feel that that people were doing things for an ulterior motive of self promotion or benefiting themselves, but I also think co-ops, they have that at their heart, an idea that people should be self-reliant. So it's not looking for handouts, it's looking for hands up, helping people and supporting people. I just think we are all so much better if we are more supportive than if people are individualistic. So yes, so definitely has had an influence, yeah.
That's interesting, and it kind of ties into the next point I wanted to talk about. With CASE, as it's developed, and of course over the decades it's supported many organisations, I'm curious how being a cooperative, that particular structure has influenced the direction that CASE has taken and the effectiveness of how it works.
Well, I think it is quite striking that when I joined Derbyshire CDA in 1985, there were, as I said, lots and lots of CDAs being set up by economic development units, and the Leicester one was just one of them. Now, looking back over that 40 odd years, how many of those survive? Not many. And those that do, like CASE, have a structure like ours. In other words, it's employee owned. So when I worked for Derbyshire CDA, a decision was taken in an office far away from me that the CDA would be closed and the employees would be offered alternative employment within the council or redundancy. So that was that first experience, and then so from there I went to work for Nottingham CDA, and I don't know whether it was me or hope not. It was the economic climes of the time. That too had a similar fate. So when I was working at Leicester, we faced the same economic constraints that all the other CDAs had faced. We were funded by the local authority. The local authorities became under increasing pressure to stop funding anything other than statutory provision. There was a cap on rates and all that. So it was a real pressure. And we decided, because we were the owners of the business, that instead of taking the redundancy or whatever was being offered, that we would actually continue to trade. And that decision was taken in about 2005, I think. So for the past 16 years, nobody was made redundant. We all found our own work. We continued to work. And what we also found was that by moving away from the local authority funding, because funding comes with strings, so people expect you to do things, work in certain ways and so on and so forth, that we were actually able to organise our own work-life balance according to our own needs, whether they were economic needs, so sometimes people need more hours and need more work, and others need less. Our way of working, for example, so we went to home working 2 months before COVID hit. So how serendipitous was that? But it works fine and it works well for us. So to be in control and to not have decisions made about your future in a faraway place, it has been terrific, and it really has been a great place to work. And there is also that sort of ability to actually put into practice what being a good employer looks like. So, lots of good employers have lots of good policies. But actually, because we can be flexible, we can say, well, it doesn't really matter what the policy says. This situation has presented itself for one of our members, and it's almost like you would be making a decision within a family who, one person might have had some drama or trauma in their lives and how we're going to react to that. Others might be celebrating something really spectacular. How can we make any adjustments for that? There's no policy for it. It's just treating people like human beings. And that's been great as well, that other people step up to the plate and fill gaps or step back and give others more work if they need it. It hasn't always all been sunshine. At one point we actually didn't have any money to pay ourselves. And again, in an employment situation, you would have gone, right then, that's us. Wind the company up. Is there enough money to pay statutory redundancy? Because if not, we'll go to the government for the redundancy. Or do we continue to work for nothing? And I think if you were working for another organisation, how many would actually work for nothing? There were vague promises that we would keep a tally of what we had earned but not been paid for and put that down as a member's loan. And that period was a really tough period and lasted months and months and months. And I think it really did come a bit close. for us to sort of say, we can't do this, we've got to throw in the towel. But we survived it. All the business loans, all the members' loans got paid back. And it's been really worthwhile because, apart from the financial side of it, apart from the flexibility of work, the bonds that develop between individuals who you have absolutely nothing to do with other than the fact that you all turn up to work Monday to Friday 9 till 5 are really great. It really does develop trust and sort of understanding, which has been, is a really good way. We spend an awful lot of time at work, so to be able to work in that environment is really great from my point of view. Yeah.
So that's an interesting exploration of the strengths and the flexibility
Yeah.
of the cooperative model.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, following on from your own story of how you got started in cooperatives and the heritage and the history around you in cooperatives. There'll be people today thinking about setting up an organisation, particularly as we're in unknown uncertain times when people often are interested in setting up an organisation. We're hopefully looking to a post-COVID environment, for example.
Yeah.
And do you think there's a place for co-ops in the present day?
There is, and I think perhaps not enough people know that because being out of work, if you've been furloughed or you've been made redundant, can be very isolating. That if they have the opportunity of joining with others who are like-minded, I guess it's not for everybody, and developing that way of working where you pool your resources, and that might mean money and sharing office space or skills or what have you, to work towards something can have a real benefit. And I think if you look at sort of the platform businesses that are being established, Airbnb or things like that, the concept of sharing what you've got is kind of inbuilt to them. But of course, when it comes to sharing the profits, there is kind of a concentration on the rest with the founders and the shareholders, and that's their business model. But yes, it would be good, wouldn't it, if you could have that. If only Amazon had a cooperative business model, for example. I think a lot more people would be happier to use them, knowing that the profits would be shared, and maybe issues like the tax that is paid. I know at Central England Co-op we have members' meetings, and members can go and ask about our tax policy, and the tax policy is transparent and written in the annual reports. And that's, I think, it would be good if that sort of model was echoed in all sorts of walks of life. That honesty, working for the majority, the interests of the majority, and the transparency, the democracy, having a say, it produces good businesses. And that's not to say that there aren't good businesses that aren't co-ops, because clearly there are, but it's a business for a purpose. And that purpose is to make money, of course, and to make a surplus, but it's what you do with it, and that's kind of key and important.